Well, welcome everyone. Good morning. This is the Hess panel on sustainability in the 21st century. This panel is part of a week-long series. Hopefully you've gotten to hear some of the talks already. And this evening will be the Memorial Hess Lecture, and we have one more event tomorrow. I would like to have a special welcome to the students who are here from Professor Shtob's class. I would also like to welcome our panelists. My name is Tammy Lewis, and I am a sociology professor at Brooklyn College. I will serve as the moderator of this panel, and I'm also going to be a panelist. Before we begin our presentations, I would like to ask Professor Shtob to do the land acknowledgement for us.
Thank you, Professor Lewis. And I would like to add my deepest thanks to everyone taking part in the panel, including Winona LaDuke, the other panelists, and anyone who had a hand in helping to organize the events of this week, including Professor King, the Wolf Institute for Humanities, and many of my new colleagues. I offer this both on my own behalf and also on the behalf of my students, many of whom are in attendance today live, and many others who will be watching a recording later. Before moving on, we must acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of the Munsee, Lenape, and Canarsie. We, the Brooklyn College community, acknowledge that academic institutions, indeed the nation state itself, was founded upon and continues to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and to recognize the hundreds of Indigenous nations who continue to resist, live, and uphold their sacred relations across their lands. We also pay our respect to Indigenous elders, past, present, and future, and to those who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I hope that you join me in thinking about this acknowledgement as an affirmation or a reaffirmation of working towards decolonization, not only as a special or once-in-a-while project, but as a fundamental and continuing element of each of our work as teachers, students, researchers, and humans. Thank you again.
Dan, thanks very much for that. So let me begin just by providing an overview of how we've organized this session. We have 4 speakers today, including me. After my brief presentation, we're going to hear from John Mussington. John is an educator and a conservationist from the island of Barbuda. Then we will hear from Branco, one of our very own professors for Earth and Environmental Sciences and Urban Sustainability. He is currently the director of the Science and Resilience Institute at Jamaica Bay. And our final speaker today will be our guest of honor, Winona LaDuke, who is a scholar, an activist, and a farmer. You can read everyone's bio on the website for the Hess events. What we're going to do today is each one of us is going to speak to 3 questions. We're going to talk about what is sustainability, why is it crucial, and what strategies can we use to achieve it. After we've all done our presentation, we'll take questions, especially those questions from students. And throughout the presentation, I ask you to add your questions into the chat. So I'm going to begin. I'm going to share my screen here. And I'm going to talk about a program that I helped to develop with some other people who are on this Zoom, including Brett Branco and Ken Gould, the program of urban sustainability at Brooklyn College. So let me see if I can do this feat of screen sharing. Is that working? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm going to start off by talking about what is sustainability. In general, sustainability is considered to fall at the intersection of 3 things: environmental integrity, social justice, and economic well-being. And so in the urban sustainability program, we always say there are 3 pillars to sustainability: environment, equity, and economy. In Brooklyn College's Urban Sustainability Program, we require students to take courses in each of these 3 pillars. So we have some of those students here today. They're taking environmental sociology, they're taking environmental science, they're taking courses in economics. And we think all three of these areas need to be well understood in order for us to be able to make strategic actions toward creating sustainability. In addition to learning about the content areas, we also have built into our curriculum certain skills that we want students to develop. And one of these really important skills is communication. We believe it's necessary for environmental scientists to be able to talk to politicians, to be able to talk to sociologists in order to actually do problem solving in the real world. So one of the things that our curriculum is designed to do is to overcome some of this tension that I've been hearing about this week. And I think it's a really healthy tension. And it's this tension between, should I be doing research or should I be doing action? You know, should I be, studying urban sustainability or should I go work on Winona's farm? So it's this kind of this tension between thinking and action. And I want to say to students in particular, you don't have to choose one or the other. And in fact, the way we've designed our program is that you should really be doing both. So let me tell you a little bit why I think it's important to have these together. One of the things we do when we study, say, environmental sociology is we are studying the systems that have been put in place that have generated the multiple crises that we're currently facing. And we have to understand how these systems have been built so that we can figure out how we can undo them. So in environmental sociology, for example, we study how our belief system contributes to unsustainability. So how our belief in individualism and materialism and our uncritical faith in technology has pretty much contributed to an economic, political, ecological system that destroys our ecological integrity and in fact generates economic and social injustice. And so if we want to create real lasting change, we really need to get at the systemic level. And so even though there might be things that we go out to make us feel better about who we are, if we go out and we recycle and that makes us think we're doing good actions, that may only serve to make us feel better and actually not change anything. So we need to do this research and study so that we can understand these social institutions that maintain injustice and ecological systems. So while we currently live in a system that perpetuates, having more stuff and making more money and really kind of is driven by a profit motive, there are other places that have constructed different systems. And if we can study these places, we can learn that the system that we have structured is changeable and there are other alternatives out there. I happen to do research in Ecuador, which is a South American nation with a really high percentage of indigenous people. And in Ecuador, environmental groups and indigenous groups joined together to get the federal government to adopt a national development strategy that they call Sumac Causai. That is a Quechua word. It's translated to Spanish to mean buen vivir, and a loose translation to English would be, good living. And the idea of good living that is being perpetuated in Ecuador is the idea that we can live in nature, or we can live together in our communities in harmony with nature, and that Pachamama, Mother Earth, should be respected. So in Ecuador, they're basically saying good living means meeting people's material needs, achieving a dignified quality of life and death, loving and being loved, living in peace and harmony with nature, having free time for contemplation and personal emancipation, right? So this idea of buen vivir, or Sumac Causai, values people over profit, and it subordinates economic objectives to ecological health and human dignity and social justice and a spiritual connection with the earth. Now, to study this allows us to kind of imagine, what if we organized our life in New York City around Buen Vivir? What would it look like if, you know, Brooklyn was organized so that these were our priorities? So another place I started to study recently is the Kingdom of Bhutan. And Bhutan is a Himalayan nation that's decided to measure its, you know, progress in terms of gross national happiness, right? So they're putting a different goal out there than the goals that we have. So doing this research as scholars allows us to reflect on our own society's values, to think about what strategic actions we can make to create change. So some of the things I ask my students to is, what would the good life look like to you? How would we structure our society if happiness were our goal? How will we structure our society if biological diversity, increasing that, were our goal? What if we prioritize free time, time with our families, time with nature? And so researching these other socio-environmental systems allows us to imagine something different than what we have learned in our society. All this stuff about like more is better, you know, having more money, having more stuff, that sort of thing. So researching these other societies allows us to see that other worlds are possible. And I love this question that is actually from Thomas Prinson's book. He asks us, how would we organize our politics, our economics, and our education if we prioritize social justice and ecological integrity? So in our urban sustainability program, we encourage our students to envision new social arrangements and then to act to realize them. And we don't have, you know, some 50 things you can do to make the world a better place. It's really complicated. And we teach our students, you know, that they need to act individually, but they actually need to change social structures. Into our curriculum, we build action, right? So we have to have all this study, but we also have to have action. So we have structured the urban sustainability curriculum to emphasize internships, local research projects with community partners. We take students on field trips to places in Jamaica Bay, like Plum Beach. We go to community gardens. We go to Superfund sites. Our students, there's a picture of Brett, I see you smiling, Brett. We take our students to recycling plants. Our senior research project is designed so that students solve a real world problem for a real world partner in conjunction with each other. And so what we're trying to do in this program is to train students holistically, both to be able to think and to be able to do. And our students go on to careers that actually help to make our city healthier and more livable. So in short, let me just summarize by saying that the Urban Sustainability Program at Brooklyn College is designed to produce scholar activists like our guest today. And as an educator, that's the strategy that I have personally taken to help to solve our sustainability crisis. Let me stop sharing there and move on to our next speaker. John, I saw you. Welcome, John. You weren't here right at the beginning when we got to do our chit chat, but we are so happy to have you here with us today. And as I mentioned, John comes to us from Barbuda, and I will let him take over the screen.
Thank you, Tammy. And I must say it is a pleasure and honor to be here. Let me, first of all, bridge the gap. One of the things that me and my family normally do is for summer break, we usually spend about maybe 6 to 8 weeks in New Jersey. And some of the times we spend coming over to New York just to see what the city is and that sort of thing. What that has done for me is to provide context with regards to how we live in Barbuda. And even though it's an excitement for me and the kids and so on in the big city and so on, whenever I'm there, my thoughts are always on, okay, how can I live or how can people live under those conditions and be healthy and be well and that sort of thing. Because at the end of the day, this question of sustainability, and I'm going to talk about that in the context of my reality here in Barbuda, the question of sustainability, for me, it is the ability to live, the ability to grow, the ability to do those things in a healthy and well, be basically healthy and wellness kind of situation. And a part of that sustainability is to be able to pass on to your future generations, your children, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, also that ability to live off of the resources that you have and to be able to guarantee that they can continue doing so without depleting and causing it to deteriorate and causing you to essentially not continue to live off of those resources. So Barbuda is a small island compared to New York City. We're just a speck, 62 square miles. You've seen it on the map there. It is flat. It is extremely dry. So whenever you hear about this climate crisis, all right, and there's some persons in the US that say it is a Chinese myth, people may have the luxury to say that. But for us living on a small island like Barbuda, 62 square miles, very dry, and we have been living there as started off as enslaved people in that Atlantic slave trade. And for over 300 years, we have been able to thrive in such a way that when you look at the quality of the resources, the simple things like how clean the ocean is, how clean the beaches is, see those beaches and those horses on the beaches there? It is the closest thing to heaven that you can experience right now on this earth. Look at the wide open spaces, the fresh air, the wilderness. We have been able to live on that island for 300 years and continue to do so today. And the reason we're able to do so is because of this thing, sustainability. All right? So for us, it is important that we understand what is the basis of that sustainability, which is the resources, the land, and all those things that the land support. And you also have to be able to manage that in terms of your lifestyle. So some of the things that we do in Barbuda, the marine resources are very important because we're a small island and we have the ocean, and be able to fish the lobster and the fish and so on. Lobster for us, breakfast, lunch, and dinner is not a luxury, right? It's something we eat commonly, all right? For you in New York to have a lobster dinner, it is almost unbelievable in terms of the price, all right? But these are the small blessings that when you actually are able to experience both worlds, then you understand what really is important in life. And I hear what you've said, Tammy, in terms of the introduction and the great work you're doing in terms of the students. And I think it's very worthwhile because to find that space, to find that way in which to live in Brooklyn City, to live in New York, to be able to be healthy, that is critical in terms of our purpose here on earth. And nothing else is important than your health and that question of sustainability and passing on to the future. Now, Barbuda, in spite of the fact that we have found a way to survive over those 300 years, we are also very vulnerable to things that are happening in the world today. And when I said the climate crisis and the fact that some people have the luxury of thinking or saying that oh, maybe it's just a hoax and this is just theory, for us in Barbuda, it is a reality. For the past decade, every single day, we have been seeing the reality of that climate crisis. In 1995, we had our first major Category 5 hurricane, tropical storm Hurricane Lewis, devastated the island. Again in 2017, we had another Category 5 plus hurricane, which was just off the charts. And it basically tore through Barbuda. And you know what? At the end of it all, we only had one death, but the island survived. And the reason for that is because of the quality of the resources that we have. We have extensive wetlands, and we have been able to live and sustain these things in a way that we gain protection from it. After the hurricane, we were evacuated from the island because there was another storm coming down, Hurricane Jose, and it was said that this storm was going to hit us. And so we were evacuated from the island, many of us. Some of us did not leave. I did not leave at that time because I suspected that there were ulterior motives in terms of what was being done. And so there was that evacuation. And since then, we have had a fight on our hands in terms of how do we ensure that this sustainability that we have managed to perfect, because there are challenges to that. Unfortunately, in this world, there are people who see instances of disasters like that, hurricanes, as an opportunity to change systems. For us, there are people who saw it as an opportunity to change the land system that we operated under. The land system that we operate on is communal ownership. And I think in New York right now, there is a move towards trying to pattern some of the management of these systems in terms of community land trusts. Because when you think about farms, open communal farms and so on, these are the kind of things that will assist in terms of being able to live sustainably in a big city. So the community land trust is one of the mechanisms which are being looked at, which we in Barbuda have always lived that way in terms of our communal way of life. So that hurricane was seen as an effort by persons to grab land. And there is such a thing as disaster capitalism. It took place in Puerto Rico, it took place in Barbuda, and as I speak, there are situations in St. Lucia, situations in Grenada, where big quote-unquote developers are looking to buy up property. There's this company, for example, Discovery Land Company, which has a exclusive residential community in the Bahamas, Abacus, Bahamas. Some of you may remember Bahamas being hit by Hurricane Dennis a couple of years ago. Bahamas is very much like Barbuda. The difference is in Bahamas, that land company was able to get crown lands and turn it into a private thing, and they built these luxury homes, and they destroyed the wetlands. And so when that hurricane hit Abacus, Bahamas, it devastated that island. We were spared of that because we had communal land ownership. We still maintained our control over the resources. Those resources were not developed into luxury homes, and so we had the wetlands, and that protected us against the hurricanes. So what you're seeing in the picture there is an area called Palmetto Point, which Discovery Land Company has gotten the contract. That same company that operates in Abacus Island, Bahamas, they have taken that development and they now want to superimpose it on Palmetto Point in Barbuda, which happens to be a Ramsar site. Now, the Ramsar Convention is an international convention which seeks to protect wetlands of international significance. So migratory birds which travel from country to country, they depend on these wetlands in terms of being able to survive on this planet Earth. Wetland is about water. And when you're talking about sustainability, you cannot survive and manage the resources you have unless you are able to get access to clean water for agriculture, for drinking, for health purposes. So water is critical. So that Ramsar Convention is one of those important international conventions. We are facing a situation where the disaster capitalism, where these persons hope to gain considerable profits by creating these areas of untouched nature. So we see this Palmetto Point, they're hoping to put down 450 luxury homes for purchase by wealthy persons. They're hoping to put down golf courses. In order to do so, they have dug up a part of our island. Barbuda is flat, the highest point is about 200 feet above sea level. So you can imagine the climate change predictions in terms of sea level rise, a third of our island is going to be wetlands pretty soon. And what they've found to do is to basically dig up the limestone quarry in order to build golf courses. And we are fighting that. Because what we recognize is that development following that pattern, which is going to emphasize GDP growth so that persons can play golf and buy luxury homes and people make a profit. And so your GDP is going to go up. That does not benefit the ordinary persons who depend on the resources, who have been doing so for the past 300 years sustainably. And that is a difference between growth development and sustainable development. And small islands like Barbuda, we have to try to get the world to understand that we have had it right all along. And the big economists, the globalization people, they have got it wrong. And so what you're seeing in the inner cities now, like New York and so on, where you're beginning to see the crisis, the answer is not going the route of GDP growth and the mega development and so on. It's going back to earth, going back to nature, the communal farms, the productivity in terms of eating fresh. Stop the imports and the manufacturing where you have to basically colonize other parts of the world so that you can gain that wealth to live a particular lifestyle. No, we have to start thinking globally, and that is part of sustainable development. Think globally, act locally. So wherever you are, live in a particular way so you can, in New York, be producing those greens using your aquaponics technology, your small farm and stuff like that and so on. And so in Barbuda, for example, the Barbuda Research Complex, which we pioneered in 2013, we saw the challenges that we're going to be facing in terms of the climate crisis. And we recognized that we had to get by in terms of adaptive strategies. So the Barbuda Research Complex, we started looking into things like aquaponics in terms of being able to provide food security, being able to grow your own food with minimum water, because you're going to have droughts, you're going to have storms that wipe you out. You have to be able to pick yourself back up and in 2 weeks begin to produce food again. Renewable energy, clean energy, those are the strategies that you do, and they're all part of sustainability. No longer can we be, should we be able to, should we continue to depend on fossil fuels, exploiting other parts of the world for raw material, for example, Elon Musk and lithium, and devastating areas in South America so that they can have access to lithium and these other metals for your cell phones and technology. It's not fair. And we have to think of our brothers and sisters in this global community, and we should not be doing things that will eliminate them and use, for example, disasters which are more or less the result of climate change, and use those things as an excuse to huff or take over other resources at our expense. So that is our reality in Barbuda. We have something to say, a message to send the rest of the world in terms of living sustainably. We have been doing so for the past 300 years. Land ownership is critical. We own our land communally. Land is not for sale, and that is the basis of our fight right now. We have a fight to the death in terms of maintaining that sort of lifestyle which is sustainable. So let me stop there, and I hope I've been able to paint a picture of this little part of the world, and then you can see the context in it in terms of New York City, Brooklyn, and so on, where you are in terms of things that you can do to make us all live better in this world sustainably. Thank you.
John, thank you so much. That was great to see the images and hear you explain about the threats to sustainability in Barbuda, and I'm looking forward to being able to hear some more about that in the question and answer. Next up, I would like to invite my colleague, Brett Branco. Brett, I believe you're going to share your screen. Yes? Okay, so Brett is going to talk to us today about resilience and sustainability.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Tammy. And I really appreciate John's presentation because I think it leads right into some of the things that I want to talk about. So I am currently the director of the Science and Resilience Institute at Jamaica Bay. Prior to taking over that position, before Rebecca Boger took over, I was the director of the Urban Sustainability Program. And one of the things I like about being the director of the Science Resilience Institute is it's where the theory to practice happens. It's an interdisciplinary center, and I'll talk a little bit more about its role in a second. But I did want to focus on resilience rather than sustainability because over the last 10 years, this concept of resilience has really risen and become a big part of the discourse on climate adaptation, resource management. It's risen as a concept to almost sort of equal the discourse about sustainability in policy and planning circles. And it's a bit of a contested concept, this idea of resilience. And there's a lot of debate about whether resilience is part of sustainability. Is sustainability part of resilience? Are they completely separate concepts? And so I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between the two, and then talk about how we as a public institution fulfill an important role in the resilience and sustainability practice, and why community engagement is so important, which sounds probably crazy coming from an oceanographer, but that's what you get by being part of the Urban Sustainability Program and mixing in with other disciplines. So, so let's talk about resilience versus sustainability for a second. This is one way to think about it, and it should come as no surprise to the students in the Intro to Urban Sustainability class that I would adopt a systems approach to thinking about these things. But one thing that sustainability and resilience as concepts have in common is they both are concerned with systems and how they work. And when we talk about systems, we're talking about social systems nested within ecological systems that are nested within the biophysical systems of the earth. And there's components to each and every one of these that have relationships with each other. And you know, whether you're thinking about resilience or sustainability, one thing that you really do want to understand is how the system works. And what the system is producing. What are the outputs of that system? What are the functions and services? And how is the system serving human well-being? And I would say that for sustainability, it's often concerned with the outputs of the system, right? Is the system producing the functions and services? Is it supporting human well-being? And if you look at sustainability goals, you can kind of imagine, right, that's what we are, that's what sustainability is concerned with. And if the system isn't producing the functions and services that we value, if it's not supporting human well-being, how can we manipulate the system to change the outputs? And I think John even kind of mentioned systems in his presentation. Where resilience is concerned, though, resilience really just resilience isn't really a value-laden concept, right? Resilience concerns itself with how does the system respond to things like disturbances, right, or big shocks. So, for example, a hurricane is a shock to a system. A financial crisis is a shock to a system. Abrupt changes in political ideologies at the head of nations is a shock to the system. And resilience concerns itself with how the system responds to those shocks and whether or not it continues to put out the same functions as it did prior to the shock, or whether it fundamentally changes. And it's not just the shocks; it also has to do with how the system responds to long-term pressures like sea level rise, right? Is a pressure on the systems of Jamaica Bay, for example, or growing inequality. If it happens slowly and over time, that can be considered to be a pressure that's acting on the social system, right? That has repercussions. And so again, resilience is really concerned with how the system responds to these shocks and these pressures, and whether it continues to produce the functions that we value. If a system undergoes shocks and responds to pressures in such a way that it doesn't really fundamentally change, then we say that the system is resilient. but that's not a good thing if the system is not producing functions and services that we value. If the system supports, for example, inequality, that's not a desirable output, and therefore sometimes resilience is something that has to be overcome in a system in order to achieve sustainability goals. You have to figure out how to break the system and put it back together again in a way that we desire. And so that, to me, like, that's one way to think about the relationships between resilience and sustainability. They're related as far as I'm concerned, and they require interdisciplinary thinking to really understand them. So, like I said, there's many definitions that you'll see out there for resilience. This is one that I particularly like because it does speak about desired functions of systems, and it does think about transforming systems. I think the one thing that's missing from this particular definition from Miro, Newell, and Stoltz is that sometimes we need to transform systems that produce undesired functions. And that's an important part of sustainability, not necessarily resilience. So thinking about the role of public institutions like Brooklyn College and CUNY in this resilient sustainability space, I would say that that it's the responsibility of public institutions like Brooklyn College and like CUNY to sit here and be this locus for change at the intersection between academia, government, and the public. And what I mean by that is public institutions as respected institutions, and so Brooklyn College and CUNY, we're not in the city, we're of the city. We educate the citizens of the city. We're staffed by the people of the city, and it's funded by the public, right? So it's really our responsibility to sort of serve as what we call a boundary organization, right, at the interface between academia, thinkers, the government, the people who are oftentimes, responsible for policy making and some specific stewardship responsibilities, and the public who are affected by all of this. So the Science Resilience Institute and the Urban Sustainability Program, among others, are two sort of ways that that public institutions can kind of situate themselves, as part of that locus for change. So the institute itself, this is the mission statement, which is in some ways maybe aspirational, trying to achieve this, but supporting inclusive and equitable planning and decision making for climate adaptation and environmental stewardship in Jamaica Bay. So it's very much place-based in that we are focused on Jamaica Bay, which is in our backyard, and the communities that surround Jamaica Bay. And we accomplish this mission by fostering co-produced and usable knowledge. And for co-produced, what I mean is I'll talk about that in a second, but it's a very important part of it. Usable, which means that we're kind of focused on applied research. And we engage in research, education, and engagement with communities, agencies, and other stakeholders. So, again, I kind of alluded to this, but I'm an oceanographer by training. So I'm a physical scientist. But over the years, I've received an education from my colleagues and from students and from the people I work with about other aspects of resilience and climate adaptation. And I've now come to understand this concept from 1969, which is still highly applicable, the Arnstein's ladder of citizen participation. And part of the strategy of the Institute is to make sure that we're at the very least striving to be in the green part of this ladder with respect to participation of communities in the work that we do. In other words, we don't want to be the ivory tower where everything is happening just internal to the institution. And we certainly don't want to be talking to just agencies and other institutions that make important decisions, but we want to make sure that we have meaningful partnerships with the communities that are affected by all of the work on climate adaptation and resource stewardship around Jamaica Bay. So what that really means is that when we build programs, research programs around issues such as the frequent chronic nuisance flooding that occurs in some neighborhoods around Jamaica Bay in response to sea level rise and poorly planned development in coastal zones, it means that that we have to do that in partnership with the communities that are actually being affected by this flooding. And this is the bottom photos is a photo from an event we ran with a community in Canarsie, where we're trying to empower people in Canarsie to fully engage in resilience planning, adaptation planning in their neighborhood. So I'll just leave it at there. I know it was brief, but the point is that what we do at the Institute is related to both resilience and sustainability, and it's a place where we sort of practice what we preach about interdisciplinary thinking and the importance of the public and community engagement in the work that we do. So thank you, and I look forward to the discussion in a few minutes.
Brett, thanks so much for sharing about the SRIJB and the co-production of knowledge with an eye to resilience and sustainability. Thanks. And last but not least, we are going to invite Winona LaDuke to share her screen and tell us her thoughts on sustainability in the 21st century. Winona, you're muted.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. You might want to hit a slideshow, start from beginning or wherever.
That is the beginning. I think
Right.
I got it.
If you hit,
Do you have it? Is it say new green revolution and my pictures on it?
yep, and you can make it a full screen if you go to slideshow.
Oh
and
yeah. Thank you. That's what I did last time, and then I freaked out on it. How's that, team?
Perfect.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Good. Very nice to be here with you all. I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about the new green revolution, and that is the cannabis economy. Now, I am a hemp grower. That is to say that I have been growing hemp with a state of Minnesota permit for 5 years. I've been working with tribal hemp producers throughout, particularly my region, which is northern Minnesota, Manitoba, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Kind of the Great Plains territory, but also the territory where there are a number of large landed tribes, 2 million acre reservations, 1 million acre reservations, and an incredible amount of potential for the new green revolution. Okay. This is some of my hemp farmers, and there are many of them. Really proud of my relationship with these farmers. I provided seeds to a number of tribes this year, and what we are interested in primarily is fiber hemp. I'm going to talk a little bit about fiber hemp and the rest of the cannabis economy, but just so you know, it's all cannabis sativa. It just looks different, and that which I grow can't get you high. In other words, it's less than 0.3% THC, and that's the, so it's focused on as a fiber hemp variety. And I want to talk about that because historically, just think of this, the word canvas comes from cannabis, showing kind of the significance. Rope making, sails, pretty much everything was once made of hemp or was once made of cannabis. It's got 10,000 uses for sure. And what I want to say about it is that, you know, I've heard it said, and it's true, it's a really interesting idea, is that we had a choice between a carbohydrate economy and a hydrocarbon economy in about 1920, and we made the wrong choice. And so what I am proposing and what we are proposing is the return to a carbohydrate economy, which is the new green revolution. So here's a little bit about the history of it. This is Henry Ford sitting with a car that he made out of hemp and fueled on hemp. And this is him talking about the potential for hemp as the core economic, as the core material for the vehicle industry. Hemp is very American. The Constitution was written on hemp. And in the initial farm bill in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, in fact, it was required that new farmers would grow a 1/4 acre of hemp and a 1/4 acre of linen for their own uses. And as well, in up to World War II, hemp for victory, as you can see from my little slide here, was intended to be the place that, was critical to the naval fleet and was all of the materials used for uniforms. All of that was made of hemp, and that was all grown in this country. This is some pictures of old school hemp decortication equipment, all kinds of different equipment and technology. It's kind of an interesting pursuit. I've been, as I said, doing it for 5 years, but with the criminalization of hemp, it's been very difficult to kind of trace this history down. So here are some hemp mills in Minnesota. Minnesota used to have 11 hemp mills in it, 11 hemp mills in Minnesota. And so I just want them back, basically. And they produced all of this canvas, all of these material products for a materials economy. Criminalization of cannabis, people could say, I like that film, Who Killed the Electric Car? It's kind of like who killed the hemp industry? And all of the big guys killed the hemp industry. The timber industry killed the hemp industry. The paper industry killed the hemp industry. The oil industry killed the hemp industry. The rubber industry killed the hemp industry. All of them had a hand in it. And so it was criminalized, the Marijuana Tax Act, and by the 1940s, hemp was not grown in Minnesota. But these are, as you see, this is the protests over the hemp criminalization. It was multiracial protests, and a lot of farmers in our area were just really devastated with the criminalization because they used hemp just for rope and materials in their farm. And they just grew it, and they used it as a part of their farm. The consequence of criminalization and the marijuana criminalization has been, of course, disproportionately borne by people of color. And across this country, arrests are usually more people of color for particularly marijuana. And, so I'm saying is that the implications of criminalization were not equally felt by everybody. The criminalization of cannabis is, in fact, felt much more significantly by people of color. Arrests of cannabis in this country still very high, and the amount that is cost of the criminal justice system of putting in people in jail for a joint is pretty high. And yet, the market, with the legalization of hemp and the legalization of cannabis, hemp was legalized under the Farm Bill 2 years ago in 2018. And of course, cannabis legalization is now in a number of states across the country with various levels of whether it is medical cannabis or whether it is recreational cannabis, all evolving in this industry. Now, the point of having part of this discussion now is if you were going to take a new economy and reboot it so that it was equitable, so that it included people of color from the beginning to the dispensary, this is the industry you want. It's a new, emerging, and growing exponentially industry across this country. And so, that's some of the potential of this. Now, by, the United States is, however, in terms of hemp, one of the largest importer of hemp products in the world. And our hemp comes in from, we import it from across the world, but it is largely grown in China. So anything like, I'm not wearing my full hemp outfit today, but any hemp fabric that you see in this country was pretty much made in China because they never criminalized it. And so all of that continues to exist, and the United States continues to import hemp at increasing rates from China. In addition to that, hemp is, like seeds, are imported largely from Canada. But it is, and this is just about hemp milk. Hemp has every, possible use. I am, as I said, a hemp grower. I produce food products with hemp. I produce pesto sauce, a mole sauce, and I'm working on hemp. I did make hemp pasta, and I'm about to try to roll out a line of hemp pasta. Has a very good nutritional value. Hemp milk is the answer to a lot of us who are lactose intolerant. Good opportunity. Hemp ice cream, really good stuff. You don't need me to tell you. You can all just go try the stuff and eat it. But my point is that the market is growing with decriminalization and legalization. It's a huge and growing market, and it is going to continue to grow. And why we want it to grow is because hemp is the answer to a lot of the problems that we are dealing with in terms of environmental and social crisis. This is a little bit about the import, huge imports into this country. So what if we made a domestic hemp economy? That's kind of the question. What would it do? What would it transform? This is the beginning of the hemp economy in this country in the last century. The guy on the left is named Alex Whiteplume. I'm standing in his yard. And there's a film, Standing Silent Nation, which I should have referred to in my bibliography, but you just got it, Standing Silent Nation, which is about the persecution by the DEA of Alex Whiteplume and his family. And Alex Whiteplume is an Oglala man from the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, technically receiving that poverty indicator of being the poorest county in the country for many years. And in that county, he has all this land, and so he started growing hemp for this very purposes that I'm talking about, the revolutionary opportunity of the hemp economy. His first charges happened around 1999. Federal charges, the DEA seized his crop. Federal drug charges went, but when the DEA seized his crop, they seized it and they burned some of it, but they shook the crop. And so I'm in his yard. Legally, at the time I was talking to him, he could not touch the hemp. But when they seized the crop, the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, basically reseeded his whole yard with hemp. And so this is some of Alex Whiteplume's hemp. We call him the Hemperor. This is my family and our hemp crop. 2 years ago, my tribal hemp field on the reservation. I mean, just, roughly my extended family, we will call them that. And so this is the tribal hemp field near Callaway, Minnesota. This was the 2018 crop. This is why you want hemp. My interest primarily is in textiles, and that's because hemp is the thing you want to do to replace cotton. And having said that, cotton accounts, as you can see, is 4% of the world's agriculture and 25% of the world's pesticides. It uses a significant amount of water and needs twice as much land as hemp to grow the same amount of fiber. So, similarly, trees could be replaced with hemp and hemp products. All of these things in terms of the, paper industry could be replaced entirely with hemp. Much more sustainable product that could be grown, throughout our territories. Hemp building materials. Now, I think the third largest source of CO2 emissions by an industry, in the world is concrete. Concrete is one of the most used substances, man-made. I think it's the most widespread man-made used substance in the world. And it turns out that you could replace a lot of concrete construction with hempcrete. And if you replace this concrete construction with hempcrete, you're able to, it is, there is now structural hemp. There's these hemp, kind of looks like Lego blocks coming out of Canada. And those guys can do structural hemp. Generally, hemp is not seen as structural, but it is the material that you use with a framed building. Many different options for hemp. Hempcrete and lime is viewed as a very, strong building material and has been used for thousands of years. This is an Israeli building made of hempcrete. And one of the reasons I point this out is that the leaders actually in medical marijuana research, the leader in medical marijuana research is Israel. And that's because they just kept with it. They're the only country that kept with it. The United States is like so far lagging behind, so backwards in its knowledge of hemp and of medical uses of cannabis, entirely far behind. And the leader is in fact Israel. Now this is our hemp decortication equipment. Now, say you're a hemp farmer and you want to do something with your hemp. That's the problem. The problem is that when they criminalized hemp in this country, not only did they, the question of who killed hemp is known, but the question of where the body went is a whole other question. Because in criminalizing hemp in this country, in Canada as well, they basically erased all the patents, all the data, all the information on hemp production and value-added processing. And so trying to rebuild the hemp industry in this country is kind of like trying to put together a forensic puzzle and then adapt it with new technology and social justice in this arena, in this generation. Really, really interesting prospect. And so I started growing hemp and I'm like, well, how are we gonna process this? And so I looked all around the world, and of course I finally purchased a hemp decortication equipment. That's what this is. This is my hemp decorticator. And it separates out the hurd, which is the inside, from the fiber. The fiber is the outside. This is some fiber right here. I have all kinds of it in my house. In fact, I have some little rope here. And big rope. This hemp rope was made actually by my partner for me last year for my birthday. This is the first hemp rope made in Minnesota in 7 years. So say you wanted to make rope, again, out of hemp. Well, you got to decorticate it, and you got to degum. You got to decorticate it for hemp, and then you got to degum it for fabric. Can't do that in this country. So what I did is I bought this decorticator from China, of course. And so I import the thing from China. It cost me $2,500 for this piece of equipment, which is a field decorticator. You can see that it's a diesel engine. You could decorticate right in your field. And when I bought that equipment, I spent $2,500 for it, and then Donald Trump charged me $500. It cost me $50 to get it across the border. Shipped. It cost me $50 to ship it from China, but it cost me $500 in tariffs to import it from China. You know, and so I just want to point out the absurdity of trying to build an industry when you've got so many punitive aspects of it. You know, and the punishments of trying to be a hemp farmer continue with particularly the Trump administration, but this too shall pass. And so hemp plastics. You know, anything that you make out of fossil fuels, all fossil fuels are all plastic. I mean, all you know, you can make it out of hemp too, and it does biodegrade, which is like a totally revolutionary idea of in the world of garbage that we live in. But maybe you should just not make so much single-use plastic bottles to start with. That might be another much better idea than trying to figure out how to replace all your single-use plastics with hemp. And then there is the potential for hemp in bioremediation. I discussed this a little bit previously, you know, in one of the lectures. And as I said, a lot of this work is not really well known because hemp has been criminalized on a worldwide scale. But essentially because hemp can grow, you know, up to 20 feet tall in a summer, it rapidly uptakes anything that is in the soil. It rapidly uptakes anything that is in soil, including the bad stuff. And so it's considered to be a significant, have significant potential for bioremediation. Just to explain bioremediation, that's like fixing up the mess with biological products. That's basically the simplest way to describe it. So, you know, hemp has all of that potential. And then the question is equity industry. So say you have this growing industry, but how does it look? Not surprisingly, 81% of the marijuana business owners are white. Basically, people of color are not anywhere in this industry, pretty much. And so, you know, as I look at what the next economy looks like in the new green revolution, what we want is equity in the economy. We want things to make some sense. And so this has the immense potential of being able to be a transformative economy where the people who went to jail for marijuana could actually be part of the next economy. That's what justice looks like, and that's what I want to see. And so this is, you know, African American. This is medical marijuana, or this is recreational cannabis. African American growers. This is Kareem Webb, and he's in LA, and he's a business entrepreneur who successfully negotiated with LA to develop a entrepreneur program that would involve people of color, particularly coaching them along, getting them business licenses for dispensaries, and then helping, you know, with all of the facets in business development for African Americans in Los Angeles. There's other similar models, you know, around the country. And then there's us here on the White Earth Reservation. This is my team. And this is what the hemp farmers look like. I got a couple grandchildren. That's my granddaughter sitting next to me. My grandson is back on the right of me. These are kids that have come from different reservations. They planted the hemp crop on the White Earth Reservation. They've been working on the hemp crop. We planted it with horses and by hand. And this is, you know, what the new green economy looks like. And this is what the new green economy looks like, because tribes have the potential to take a leadership, particularly in fiber hemp production, because of the vast land areas of our reservations. And so we want to be producers of hemp fiber. This is the first intertribal hemp meeting, and this was 3 years ago at a cannabis summit in Denver. And this group has grown exponentially now, and there are a number of tribes involved in hemp production, and there are a number of tribes that are involved actually in the recreational cannabis industry. But we see the potential of this as the new green economy. And here is the Paiute, single largest dispensary in the country, I believe, is owned by the Paiutes, and they are in Las Vegas, just off the strip. So kind of showing you the diversity of the industry. But from my perspective, as we go into the next economy, having a plant that eliminates the petrochemicals in your clothing, from the microfibers that are in our water to the endless supply of H&M clothing, which ends up in dumpsters across this country. Hemp has the potential to create products that will be biodegradable and not toxic, to the vast potential of a materials economy, making everything from car parts to cars, replacing concrete, paper, huge materials economy potential, to the medical and recreational cannabis business, all of which have essential potential for our tribes and for people of color. You know, from my perspective, the new green economy needs to, have people of color. Now, this is who gave me my hemp decorticator. This is who I bought it from. And, I bought a bunch of other equipment from these women in China. Awesome. But as we look at rebuilding an economy in this country, you might want to start figuring out how to make stuff here that you're going to use here. And from my perspective, retooling America's industrial infrastructure in the Rust Belt so that we make stuff here and it's not all imported from China would be a brilliant idea for the new green revolution. Thanks for your time. Miigwech.
Thanks, Winona. So I think we heard some really interesting presentations, and I'm especially interested in questions to Winona and John in terms of the doing piece of this. I think, Brett and I are around to talk about the thinking part of this, but I see some overlap between John and Winona. Can maybe, John, do you want to respond to Winona's presentation? Because I think there's a lot of crossover with what you talked about.
Yes, very interesting presentation there. Because as a small island, just I think in the past couple of years, our government has decided that they want to pursue this question of medical cannabis and so on, okay? And that may be good, but now I'm seeing the realities of the situation that Winona pointed out. There is even more pointed in a small island like Antigua and Barbuda. Now, for us, we are a small island, and so the doing part of it hinges on us remaining in control of the natural resources. We have a history of communal land ownership. Our government has gone to Parliament to eliminate that communal land ownership system for the sake of being able to sell real estate to wealthy people. So that, for us, is a particularly dire situation in terms of the fight that we have on our hands. The situation in the US in terms of the reservations and what has happened to them, all right? There are similarities. And I think overall, we have to be mindful, and globally in terms of those, how these systems operate and what governments can actually do to hinder the process or to help it, that is critical. And it's going to take coming out of the universities and so on to be growing a particular crop of individuals who will participate in this democracy and act as the seed of changes. Because if you do not change government policy, we're going to have a harder time coping in terms of the doing part of it. So that's my overall response, and it's very good to see that aspect of it coming from Winona.
And Winona, I wonder, I saw a question about this in the chat, and I think it ties into what John is saying. about land ownership and the role of this. And so certainly in Barbuda, the people own the land, but can you talk about, land ownership and your farming? And I believe the question talked about, the history of reservations in our country as well. I know that's a very big question, but I think it's about land sovereignty, really.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. Industrial hemp takes some land. That's just the reality. It's a different thing, it's one thing to grow a plant, for smoking. That's a different scale, And so some people should grow that, but you should always just grow food too. That's kind of my feeling, just grow food. Now, then there's some areas like our territories in our region where you have tribal lands, and then you have those lands having been leased out to the Bureau of Indian Affairs inside our reservation to non-Indian land, to non-Indian ranchers. And so some of our tribes are looking at hemp and, as well as buffalo as a part of land restoration and land reclamation strategies and the economics of value added, from our territories. And so it's kind of like, since I do a lot of work with this, I don't, if I was going to tell you what to do in your country, I would say, get some hemp in all of your fishing gear, get all the good stuff, get the rope, get all that stuff you use, just get that, and you don't need to, you could grow it there, but you could also import it from someplace else, because that's how you have a non-toxic, materials economy. And so that's what I would say. And then, if you guys want the medicinal benefits, then for sure, you should not, it should not be criminalized anymore, anywhere. I'm for legalization, across the board. So but that's, that's just a different facet of the plant.
Brett, did you want to jump in on that?
Well, I have a million questions for both of them, and I know we can't cover them, but a couple of things that were discussed, I think in particular with respect to the hemp, was you told us who killed the hemp industry way back when, right, Winona? But not how. And it's just sort of like interesting that you were talking about the profitability of hemp in the early years, yet it still was killed. So it kind of speaks to the free market, right? Didn't really function.
It has nothing to do with the free market. It was entirely federal prohibition that killed the hemp industry. Yeah,
right.
It wasn't
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean, right? We're always sort of told that the free market will sort out what's best, and yet that's not what happened at all.
Right.
So we only have 2 minutes left, and class ends at 12:15. Winona, I wonder if you could just take the last few minutes to, give students some advice of what you think they should be doing now to be able to create more sustainability. Can you wrap us up with that?
Yeah, I mean, the opportunities for, from the position you are in of, research and hands-on work right there in your village or your city are immense, and then the policy issues in New York around hemp and cannabis obviously need resolution, and justice. That's what I would be doing if I was looking at cannabis. I would be figuring out how to ensure an equitable development of an industry that is a growing and will grow exponentially industry. But that is just one facet. Hemp is one facet of sustainability. And, as I listen to John talk about disaster capitalism, we are in disaster right now. And so in the opportunity we have, let's make something better. We don't want normal, we want better.
Okay, and John, would you like to have the last word for our students?
Well, as students, and especially living in the inner city, always be aware that you are a part of a global system. And whatever you do in the first world, it affects thousands of persons. That cell phone that you have, the minerals that you need, those comforts, it always comes at someone else's expense. And what we want, and what Winona pointed is equity, justice. And we need to really think about those things. And it's a critical part of sustainability, because we have to sustain this planet Earth. Okay?
All right. Well, Thank you, all of our panelists and all the students who are here, and Dan and everyone at the Hess. Please follow the Hess tonight. There's a talk today at 5 o'clock. Is that right, Rosamond? You want to say something about our talk tonight?
It's going to be great. Winona LaDuke has a new book coming out, and we're hearing a little bit of that first before other folks hear about it. And the link to register is in the chat. Everything continues to be free and open. And we have one more event tomorrow called Where Does Culture Belong? Indigenous Artifacts in Museums and Universities. So we're so excited. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks everyone. Have a great day.